This is Hiring on All Cylinders, live from HR Tech. Hello, recruiting and HR folks. Rob Stevenson here for Intello and Hiring on All Cylinders with another classic installment coming live from HR Tech. I'm very excited about my next guest. She is the founder and CEO of Guides, Brynne Herbert. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Rob.
So I always like you're a quadrilinguist. Which for?
That's the first question. Caught me off guard. So English is the first one. French is the second one. Mandarin, Chinese is the third one. And Portuguese, which is very rusty. So I'm not really sure that I should actually put that in the category. But Portuguese is the fourth one.
Portuguese is four. Well, bonjour and ni hao anyway.
Yeah, well done.
So you were on a panel yesterday with the women in HR Tech, correct? Or today?
Yeah, it was today, actually.
How did it go?
It was great. So I think this is the first time that they've done the Women in HR Tech segment of the conference. So it was about 4 hours, and there were a couple different segments. So we had technology leaders from the different companies, Oracle, Paychex, et cetera. And then we had some HR leaders from different companies. And then we had a founder and CEO portion, which is what I was on. Okay. So really just sharing insights about being a woman in technology companies. In our case, sharing insights about building the company. And it seemed to be really well received. I mean, I had a throng of people afterward asking questions and asking for more information and saying that it was a really inspiring day. So that was great.
I love it. So were there any questions that came up that you wish you could have kept talking on? I know those panels, you kind of shared the spotlight a little bit.
Yeah, that's the nature of panels. But this was actually 45 minutes. So sometimes the panels are only 20 to 30. So we got through a lot of content, actually. I mean, I always love sharing information about building companies. It's a unique journey, and there's a lot of mistakes that you make and a lot of things that you learn. So those are some of the things that I covered afterward with people that had specific questions about aspects of that.
Right. Cool. So I'm really interested in hearing about the Talent Mobility Cloud. So first of all, Guides is an organization that helps other companies with global relocation. So these companies that have headquarters all over the globe, you help them kind of move talent around and see like how to keep those moving pieces in play.
Yeah, that's right. So we at Guides have a vision to make it easy to move around the world. So with companies, we help HR departments move all of their people. So these can be interns, they can be people relocating, they can be expatriates going on assignment, or they can be what we call commuters or people doing projects and then returning home. And today it's really difficult. So the industry today is still a managed service. So the way I think about markets is they start as a managed service, then they go into software as a service, and then ultimately that software becomes intelligent and predictive, and we get into an AI category. And much of the world is talking about moving from stage 2 to 3.
Okay.
But in global mobility, we still are talking about building software to bring together all of the different people and different companies that touch global mobility, all of the data around a company's mobile employees, and automate the administrative activities for moving employees around the world. And by doing so, we dramatically reduce the costs for companies, and we also provide a much better employee experience than they've ever had today. But we're really the first software vendor in the industry, if you can believe that, in 2016.
That is surprising.
It is, and it's really, it's very interesting. So when we work with companies, and we work with many, many large listed companies, fundamentally what they're doing is reinventing their global mobility program. So they're taking what is a very analog way of doing things, and they're transforming it into digital processes using our software. And by doing that, then they really put their organization in a very different state, so that they can really think about being global and thinking about attracting and deploying talent internally and externally wherever they need it in the world.
So it's not just about moving talent, but it's about making a global mindset to like what is ultimately a cohesive workforce.
Yeah, exactly. And so global mobility also can be very fragmented and siloed within a company. Companies move, I mean, many employees. I mean, almost every customer that we work with, once we start working with them, we discover that there's all sorts of other people that are moving in various ways. It's a huge portion of an organization's workforce, and they might not be moving in the traditional sense, but they're mobile in some sense. And with that comes complexity in processes, compliance and tax obligations for the company, and complexity in the employee experience around that. And the only way that you can really solve all of that is by making sure that everything is centralized in one technology system. So all of the digital policy management, all of the information the employees are getting, all of the supply chain that actually delivers the services like shipping and immigration and finding your home. And so it's very much about putting that all in a single platform and then giving the organization the insights about their talent, the detail to be compliant, and as you said, really fostering much more of a global mindset within the company.
So what do most organizations get wrong when it comes to relocation, besides, of course, not using Move Guides?
There's a couple different areas of continued challenge, I think, with global mobility. So it's probably, the context is important that many of the companies here at HR Tech today are HR applications, and we are as well, but that's only one portion of our business. So there's a huge portion of global mobility that's tied to the supply chain. So a big piece of a company's spend goes to a supply chain of about 20 different categories of companies that actually deliver the services.
Okay.
And as an employee, those are the companies that are actually helping you move your stuff or find your home, or you're staying in their properties, etc. And so one thing that companies frankly sometimes aren't very good at, and sometimes it's just they don't want to be very good at it because it's not their core capability, is sourcing and managing all of those vendors and making them accountable for their performance, and then if something does go wrong, jumping on it and dealing with that escalation. So we do all of that at Move Guides. The other area where it can be challenging for companies is the expense management activity. And when we say expense management in global mobility, we mean the employee submitting their expenses and being reimbursed for that, and physically the payment of the cash back to the employee as well. We mean paying all of those vendor invoices. We mean paying your rent, etc. And remember, this is happening across 200 different countries and territories globally, in 130 different currencies. And most of the payments that we make are outside of the scope of like the traditional payroll cycle or the traditional finance system, because they're one-off. They're not in a particular cycle. They're small in a lot of instances, and they're like all over the place. And then the company needs to bring those all together, apply taxation logic, and report on that. And so those are really the three areas: the supply chain management, the expense management, and the reporting that companies really struggle with, and that we base all in software so that we can make those processes more efficient and more reliable for the company.
I love it. I'm really curious because Move Guides is unique. Even though it's a young company, it's very much a global company. You're all over the world. And so as you've grown this company, and when it comes to employer brand or maybe even employer engagement, how do you build a representative culture when global offices, very different cultures, are springing up simultaneously?
It's a great question, and I see maybe you've read some of my blog posts as well.
Busted.
I write a blog called Across the Ocean about building a global company, and based on my experience splitting my own personal time between our headquarters in London and San Francisco, and the different things that I observe in both technology ecosystems, and then, as you said, some of the challenges and learnings from building a global company from almost day one. So just some context. So global mobility, as we've kind of talked about, is inherently global. So there is no business if you don't operate globally.
Right.
And we learned that pretty early on, that it is the ultimate barrier to entry to any sale. And there is no, start small and expand. Unfortunately, it kind of turns the traditional startup model on its head. You have to be global and deal with that complexity. And so we had to solve that. Otherwise, we couldn't build a company in this space. And I think some of our competitors thought that, no one would be able to solve this. Like, how do you raise enough money, or how do you build an organization that can operate across all these locations as a young company? And it's an immense challenge. And I think sometimes they still say that we're not global, which is so untrue, but it is a challenge. So I think the way that we approached it is there's a framework that I use called the 3 C's, and that stands for clarity, culture, and communication. And so clarity, the first thing is, okay, here's who we are. We have to be global. We live above borders, and that's what we're doing. So that's clear. There's no debate. And if you want to be a part of this culture, and if you believe that you align to this idea of living above borders and traveling regularly in your work and that sort of thing, then this is the place for you. The second one, the culture piece, is probably the most critical. So that's defining a culture that can scale, really. So I started it. I defined our 5 company values. We talk about them a lot. And then I think the next thing is hiring the people that can then be like tentacles with those values and with the company culture. So the people that are the custodians of that culture in different offices really early on, and those hires are really, really critical. And they're not always the most senior people, by the way. I mean, I have memories of 2 people in particular in our US team that were some of the first 2 on the ground. One of them just transitioned to do something else, and I was talking to her about that over the weekend. I mean, they're fairly junior, but they were both such brilliant custodians of our culture in that how they live their lives, how they communicate, our values. And, we hired above them, we hired below them as we grew, but, we've kept that idea of cultural fit at all levels of the organization, such that I can really rely on my team to be judges of that just as much as I am today. And then the third one is communication, and that's the most challenging. I think about this probably every single day still. How do you have an efficient and clear communication system with a dispersed organization? I think that's the most difficult thing about being global as a young company. Things are moving quickly. You're changing the organizational structure for business reasons. You're kind of building the playbook while you're executing it. And it's really difficult to do that across multiple locations where the flow of information can sometimes be delayed. And I guess my main learning is over-communicate. I think we're still learning how to do that every day,
Sure.
But we try to really over-communicate and then hire for people that can communicate quickly, clearly, and regularly.
I love it. I could keep picking your brain all day. You're an inspiration, and my Portuguese is a great deal rustier than yours, I'm sure, so I'll simply say obrigado. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.